When you're dealing with an internal struggle, it's difficult to go to your board because they're your boss and you don't want to seem weak to them. And then you can't really go to your staff because you're their boss. You really shouldn't be talking with them about many of the issues that are going on. And then you go home and you shouldn't be burdening your family and friends because they don't really understand what you're dealing with. And that's the value of a coach. You have a safe space to verbally throw up on someone else who can take that information, invite God into the process, and find out what you truly need.
Welcome to Lifeline for Leaders, a podcast created to strengthen and connect those serving in pregnancy care clinics and pro-life ministries. I'm Linda Thomas.
And I'm Kirk Thomas. Each week we sit down with leaders, ministry partners, authors, and experts who shape the pro-life landscape, sharing practical insights you can use right away and inspiring stories that remind you you're not walking this journey alone.
Our mission is to help you serve with confidence and resilience. This is your community, your support, your lifeline. Today's lifeline is for the leader who feels the weight of responsibility, the pressure to stay strong, and the loneliness that comes with being one everyone depends on. But before we dive in, let's open in prayer.
Hello, everyone. Lord, thank you for every person listening today. Give us wisdom, strength, and clear direction on being a faithful disciple for you. Help us lead with courage, keep us healthy, and allow us to stay faithful to the calling you give us. In Jesus' holy name, amen.
All right. Today, we're honored to welcome Robin Fuller, professional leadership coach and founder of Bloom Coaching. Robin brings more than 23 years of experience serving as executive director of 3 pregnancy centers, and she continues that mission today by coaching and supporting pregnancy center leaders so they can thrive personally, lead effectively, and finish well. In this episode, we're going to unpack the hidden pressures leaders carry, what can quietly derail them over time, and why having someone safe and wise to talk to can make all the difference. Robin, we are so glad that you were able to join us today on Lifeline for Leaders. Welcome.
Hi, Robin.
Hi, Kirk. Both of you, Kirk and Linda, thank you so much for having me on Lifeline for Leaders. And I know this has been a journey for both of you and a dream you've had for a long time. So good job.
All right. Okay. Well, Kirk, I think you're going to start us off with some questions for Robin. I'm anxious to hear all what she has to say.
Robin and I go a long way back to when she was the executive director at Grants Pass. So thanks for joining with us, Robin. Right now, the Winter Olympics are going on in Milan, Italy. And a lot of those people are probably want to finish well, right? You talk a lot about finishing well on your website. What does it mean to finish well, Robin?
Well, for me, I remember when I was an executive director, I remembered that verse that talks about, Jesus saying, "Well done, thou good and faithful servant," and how desperately I yearned to hear that and to know that as I led this ministry, I led well. And what happened with me personally, I took my one and only sabbatical. And during that sabbatical, I heard God starting to woo me away. I didn't know how much longer I would be there, but I remember coming back and talking with the board because what God had really shown me is that I was the center of the ministry. I essentially led the board, I led the staff, I led strategic planning, and God showed me a pretty clear picture that no one person would be able to step into my role and do everything that I was doing. And so I came back and I actually talked with the board. I said, I feel like I carry the spiritual mantle for this ministry by myself. And I lifted that mantle off my shoulders, handed it to the board of directors. And I said, we have some work to do because I want to finish well. What I didn't know when I did that is that I would be there for an additional 4 years, yearning for most of those 4 years to leave, but knowing I couldn't leave until God actually pulled the trigger and said it was time for me to go because being obedient to him was more important to me. And during those 4 years, God showed all of us that to leave well, to finish well, I would need to strengthen the organizational structure. We would need to figure out how to make the board stronger. We would need to make the staff stronger. And as the leader who would be leaving, I needed to figure out what I would need to let go of this ministry that I loved so deeply.
Great point.
So what stands out about finishing well? What does that look like to you? What did that mean in your mind exactly?
Well, it meant that truly the new leader, whoever the board hired, would be able to step into my role and not have to immediately do a bunch of work. So it meant, according to the staff, that any staff messes were cleaned up. I had the right people in the right seats on the bus doing the right things, that the board was comfortable with their role. They knew what they were supposed to do. They were doing it. And so the new leader wouldn't have to do a whole bunch of work. And I see so often with my clients, I connect with a lot of new leaders and they either step into a mess that they get so overwhelmed that they don't even stay very long, or they stay in a really unhealthy situation because the work hadn't been done before they got there. I wanted to finish well. And I remember when I left, I knew I couldn't leave until I had my husband's blessing. We needed my income. I couldn't just walk away. And I remember telling my coach at the time, he asked me the question. He said, "How will you know when it's time to leave? Essentially, how will you know that you've finished well?" And I said, I needed my husband's blessing. I did not tell my husband that, but I anticipated needing his blessing. So I remember one Sunday night, he called me over to the dining room table and he said, had all these paperwork spread out. And he said, "Robin, I know you've been wanting to leave for a while. I want you to know that we're going to be okay and you have my blessing."
Mm.
So that was the trigger for me. I called the board chair the next morning. What many people didn't realize, we had our 3-night gala that week, that Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. We're a little crazy like that. We had it 3 nights, 250 people every night. And when I stood up there in front of everybody, they had no idea that I was going to be leaving. And I think if they would have known, it would have shocked them, but they didn't know. And the reason I left was because things were good. It's so valuable to leave when things are good. And that's another way that you finish well, is you leave when things are in good condition. Your policies are sound. Your staff knows their jobs. You haven't left any conflict or messes that the new person would have to clean up. So that's what finish well means to me. I hope I answered your question. That was a mouthful.
Well, you did. And what you've said clearly means it takes planning, intentionality. And I think, Kirk, you can talk about that too, right?
Yeah, yeah. I was just going to talk about burnout. I mean, for
Mm.
for people, leaders in a ministry. What are some of the warning signs that leaders going through burnout, Robin?
Well, I remember when I hit a very severe burnout, I actually called a fellow executive director friend and I said, I'm quitting. And she said, no, 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 you need to call Dawn. And I didn't know who Dawn was. I didn't realize Dawn was a leadership coach that this friend had been working with. And I trusted her. So I made an appointment with Dawn, and his very first question he asked me is, he said, "Robin, how many hours a week are you working?"
Mm.
And I said, 40. And he said, "Okay, that's well and good. So let's just imagine that you go to the grocery store and it's after hours and you run into a donor and they ask you about work. Are you in work mode or rest mode?" And I was like, "Work." And he said, "Let's say you're sitting at home and you open your laptop and you open your email, and next thing you know, you've worked in your email for 2 hours. Are you working or resting?" And I said, "Well, working." And he said, "Then at church on Sunday morning, somebody asks you about the pregnancy center, and are you working?" And he said, and let's just take it a little further. Let's imagine you're laying in bed at night and you're stewing over a staff issue or a board issue or a fundraising issue, or maybe an insurance issue, right? Are you working or resting? And I was like, I'm working. And he said, let me ask you again, how many hours a week are you working? And the reality was 70 to 80 hours a week. It can be an all-consuming job. And the follow-up question was, how long do you want to keep doing that? And if you don't want to keep doing that, I can help you with some accountability and boundaries. And if you don't have proper things in place, pregnancy center ministry is all-consuming. It can chew you up and it can spit you out. And sometimes you don't even know where the conflict's coming from or the next issue. And it never ends because in ministry work, your work never ends. There's always another client. There's always another issue. There's always another fundraising event. So if you don't have the protections in place to put yourself first, it's like the airplane, put your oxygen mask on first before helping others. And even that scripture passage that says, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. Why do we ignore those words, as yourself? If you don't figure out how to love yourself, you're not going to be able to love others. So there's value in knowing yourself, what you need, and putting those things first.
I would imagine that, well, definitely from my experience and the leaders in this ministry that I've met over the years, that they just all seem like such caring, kind, giving people, and it is probably just not in their nature to give to themselves. They are giving and they're thinking about others, and like you said, they're ignoring their own needs by doing that. But you have some classes and courses and things that you offer. Them as burnout recovery. Would some of the people that end up being your clients, what are some of the things that bring them to you? Are they ignoring some signs at first and maybe some others point those things out to them before they become aware of them? Like they're highly functional in their job, but they're not maybe functioning internally well?
Yeah, someone maybe points out, hey, Kirk, I noticed that you seem to not be doing very well, or you have a concerned look on your face. I know when I first connected with my coach, one of the issues when you lead a ministry, and this is not just for pregnancy centers, but when you're dealing with an internal struggle, it's difficult to go to your board because they're your boss and you don't want to seem weak to them. And then you can't really go to your staff because you're their boss. You really shouldn't be talking with them about many of the issues that are going on. And then you go home and you shouldn't be burdening your family and friends because they don't really understand what you're dealing with. And that's the value of a coach. You have a safe space to verbally throw up on someone else who can take that information, invite God into the process, and find out what you truly need to overcome the issue.
So
And
it sounds. Oh, go ahead, Kirk.
One of the other things too is some of the national conferences and state conferences, that executive directors can attend. And, it's a great learning experience, but it's just a great way that executive directors can get away from the normal day-to-day jobs and speak with like-minded people and just, release that kind of, the differences that they're having with their day-to-day operations. And one of the things I think that you do is host retreats too, right, Robin? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, everything that I offer in Bloom Coaching are all the things that I yearned for when I was an executive director. Part of that is that deep soul rest that you can only find with solitude and silence and truly withdrawing, which none of us in our culture are very good at, if we're really honest. Most of us can imagine being alone with all those voices in our head, right? What do you do with those voices? Henry Nouwen said they're like the monkeys jumping in the banana tree, right? And so I have done a personal retreat for 18 years where it's just me and God and my Bible and my journal at the Oregon coast. And that's been a beautiful thing. So I've done these retreats for myself, but I thought, why not do a retreat for executive directors? Because I understand their world. I know how busy they are. And the first retreat that I led for executive directors was in 2020. So what happened is COVID hit. I thought I was going to have to cancel the retreat, but what I did instead is I rented 2 houses because the rental agreements in that county in Oregon said you could only have a certain number of people in a house. So I rented a second house, and this retreat that I do, it's very special because there's very little agenda. And sometimes they get there and they're anticipating speakers and moving and going, and no. What I do is I open up opportunity for them to have time alone with God.
Mm.
And I even set the rules and the parameters. It's like, we're not going to talk about work. We're not going to talk about pro-life. We're not going to talk about politics. And if you hear somebody doing it, I give you permission to call them out, to stop it. Because as soon as you talk about any of those issues, you're stirred up and you're working.
Sure.
So for many of them, I'm like, maybe you just need to go take a nap. Or maybe you need to go walk on the beach and reconnect with God, who is so desperately wanting to connect with you. It's a beautiful experience. It's a 4-night retreat for only 10 executive directors. The retreat is filled up this year for 2026. And I would love to be able to do more of them, but it's just me. And I usually have a couple helpers, and it's beautiful, but it's a lot of work.
Well, we haven't been to Oregon, so we'll be helpers next year.
Does one of you cook really well? Because I am
Linda does.
not
Not bad. Let's get back a little bit to talking about the warning signs of burnout. You've got some questions that you ask people to kind of bring them out of to help them understand that maybe they are burned out, because a lot of people don't realize it.
Yeah, a lot of people really don't understand. And there are so many different components. So before we talk about burnout, Linda, it's really important to talk about compassion fatigue. And compassion fatigue is what comes before burnout. And with compassion fatigue, it's where you really feel compassion too much when you're dealing with traumatized people. And in pregnancy center land, this place where we're living, they really are dealing with traumatized people. The clients, the women coming to them, are dealing with more than just a pregnancy issue in our culture. And compassion fatigue can come on really fast. It can creep up quickly. It's different than burnout, but compassion fatigue, if left untreated, will generally lead to burnout. And when you're in a true burnout phase, you're not going to get out of that on your own. It generally requires working with a mental health professional, a professional coach, a spiritual mentor of some kind to be able to get away from that. And some of the symptoms of compassion fatigue, when you just feel overwhelmed, you feel irritable, you have a lack of energy, low empathy, you just keep dwelling on the client stories. You keep shoulding on yourself. I should have done this or that. You have problems sleeping. Maybe you can't wait to get home and have that glass of wine. It feels like something you need. Your relationships are having conflict issues. So these are some of the symptoms for compassion fatigue. And I really encourage all of my clients, if you can, maybe quarterly, bring in a professional, a mental health professional to serve your staff and just be on site to check in with them for a day. Give them opportunity, because when we're doing the work of pregnancy center work, we also have all our home stuff. You've got all your personal stuff. And if you have things going on with your staff and you expect them to come in and just do their job like nothing's going on, that's not even kind. So I remember one season I had 4 staff members going through really hard divorces, and it was not their fault. None of them. It was their husbands who had done things or were leaving or wanted the divorce. And I remember bringing a pastor in just to minister to them, because it can just be so hard. And this is where it feels really selfish to care for yourself. Even for me, when I'm trying to help my staff members, I needed to figure out how to help myself. And so I could help them better. And that meant spending time alone with the Lord, getting alone before Him, asking for His wisdom, and reaching out to my own coach. And our clients that we're dealing with, when you talk about compassion, fatigue, and burnout, it feels like the results of each woman's decision is on us. But it's really not. We have to be reminded that God is the one who saves those lives. We do our best as unto the Lord, and then we leave the results to Him. It's a reminder of what we all need to hear. And at my pregnancy center, and any of you can use this phrase, one of my staff members came up with the phrase, if she chooses life, God gets the glory. And if she chooses abortion, God gets the pain.
Mm-hmm.
So we said that over each woman as she left. It was not our decision to own. We also acknowledged the pain each abortion decision caused. And we would even have memorial services inside of our staff meetings to memorialize those babies who no longer had a beating heart that we had seen on the ultrasound screen. So we would take the time to honor our staff and really acknowledge the difficulty of what we do.
So when a leader tells you that they're doing fine and you know that they're not, how do you help them face reality without shame?
Well, I ask that first question, how many hours are you working? And what's amazing in the pregnancy center ministry is how many leaders are just working themselves to death. And their boards maybe don't understand how much they're working. Maybe they really don't know, or they don't check in with them enough. And it's really valuable for the boards to be able to honor the leadership and make sure that they're protected. Make sure they pay for a coach. Pay for some professional counseling if they need it. Make sure they're taking their vacation time. Make sure they're taking their personal days. I've worked with many clients who aren't even taking their vacation. So maybe they're given 3 weeks a year and maybe they take one. And some of these clients that I've had have been working for 15, 20 years and have never had a sabbatical. Sabbaticals are so critical. There's a reason why ministries that honor their leadership give sabbaticals, because it gives someone an ability to realize their identity is more than this pregnancy center job. And that's part when we talk about finishing well, for a leader to step away. And I know from experience to leave this industry, this ministry that I loved for 23 years, that was such a part of my identity. I had to do some work with my coach to figure out, what was I going to go to? How was I going to fill my time? When I left, I no longer had my staff, my volunteers, my board, the churches, the donors. All of these people were out of my life, and they needed to be, to allow the new leader to get his foothold. I needed to be out of the picture for a season. There are just so many questions you asked, what kinds of things do I ask? It really doesn't take me very long to realize the burnout phase that's going on. And they don't even have to have been in the role for long. I've worked with some brand new directors that are 2 months in, and they're already, I can see they're going to hit a pretty big burnout if they don't put some boundaries, if they don't get their priorities straight, make sure they are spending time with the Lord, make sure they're spending time with family and friends, and then the ministry comes after that. So blocking out time on their calendar, having those date nights with their husband. There are so many just different practical things, but I can generally see pretty early on if there are some things going on.
So you mentioned the executive director, but you also work with the boards too at the pregnancy care centers, correct, Robin?
Yes, I have recorded a board training for Bright Training that's going to be coming out, I think, in a month or so. And I do enjoy working with boards. I think boards need to understand the value of their chief executive and how to take care of them. And many times, like I said, the chief executive is the one doing everything. And if you have a board that can truly understand what their role is, it can be such a support for not only the outgoing executive director, but an incoming one through a transition. And when a board is truly functioning, a board chair is truly doing what he or she should be doing, leading the board, inviting committees to do part of the work. It can be such a gift for a new executive director for sure.
And how do the board members find that class you've got coming out? Is that something they'd subscribe to, or what?
That will be through Bright Course.
Awesome.
So, if an executive director is listening right now and feels exhausted, what is one step they can take with them today, this week, to start moving toward a healthier life?
Well, as I said, it's putting some boundaries in place, making sure you're taking care of yourself. There are some real basic things. And if you're not successfully managing, you're going to have all those issues that come with burnout. And it can be constant fatigue, procrastination, increased conflict, missing deadlines. There are so many things. So how do you deal with it? Well, here are just a few little simple things to do. Leave work at work. Wave goodbye to your center as you go home, and intentionally plan to be with your family at home. I actually had to ask my board to get me a desktop computer, so I stopped having everything on my laptop. That was one of the best things that I did. I also kept firm boundaries. I worked no more than 40 hours a week. If I spoke at a church on a weekend, I would take time off on a Monday. I know that's difficult for smaller centers, but find a way to take time off so you're not overworking. You might even write your to-do list at the end of the day, so you're not sitting and mulling and thinking about it all night long. You know that it's there waiting for you in the morning. You need to take a walk and exercise daily. Even just drink more water. We don't drink enough water. By the time you're thirsty, you're dehydrated already. You need to schedule social activities that make you happy with people you love. Walk your dog, get outside in the fresh air. So those are just some really simple things. My coach also, when I was in this intensive burnout, he had me do some exercises that can be really helpful. And it's just writing down, thinking about what are those things that are life-giving to me? What brings me joy? What brings me life? What increases and lifts up my countenance? Write those things down and do more of those. Add them to your life. And on the flip side, what are those things that drain the life out of you? What is life draining? Identify them. And then you need to learn to avoid or manage those. And then add some self-care practices into your life. And by all means, find a coach, find a spiritual director, find someone outside of your scope of practice, find someone outside of your scope of what you're doing who can give you an outside, godly, biblical perspective on things that are going on in your life. That was the greatest gift for me when coach was unable to be a coach anymore because of an intensive health issue that he had. That's when I heard God whisper to me that I could step in and attempt to do what he had done for me. It's been one of the greatest joys and gifts of my life.
Well, it's incredibly powerful to hear the hope that you have in your story, and that you definitely finished well.
And one of the things you mentioned was just starting your day off with gratitude, and just brings so much more energy into your day when you start off the morning being grateful for the things that we have.
Yeah, being grateful, taking the time to rest, stepping back when you need to. I even have an exercise that I teach when I have a 2-hour workshop I do on burnout that I've done with statewide groups. I've done with individual groups. It's available at a very low cost for any groups who are interested. It's a 2-hour workshop over Zoom. I know people are like, Zoom? Oh, it moves really fast. It's a lot of fun. But I do an exercise on there called prayer breathing, where you do the really deep breathing exercises, but you add scripture as you're breathing.
Awesome.
And even encouraging some of my clients to stop in the middle of your day, set an alarm, do this prayer breathing right in the middle of the day to reconnect with your body and to the one who made you. simple things like that. I have so many different tips and tricks and, things that I'm able to share. And it would be an honor to connect with anyone who's listening if you need some help or you're burned out or you want to finish well and you're not sure how.
And one of the things that you do on a monthly basis, which is awesome, is do a webinar series, right? And that's free to everybody that wants to listen, correct?
Yeah, I started over 7 years ago doing monthly roundtable discussions. I primarily serve the executive directors and CEOs. That's really the heart God has given to me. So I have a monthly roundtable discussion exclusively for them on topics that are relevant. We talk about succession planning. We talk about burnout. We talk about generational differences. We talk about board issues. We talk about fundraising. We talk about all the things that are relevant. It's completely free. It's a great way to interact with executive directors from all around the country. And all you have to do is connect with me and I can get you an invite to the next one because there's always a next one.
All right. Well, on that happy and positive note, I want to thank you, Robin, for joining us today and for the impact you've made through Bloom Coaching. And to every leader listening, don't wait until you're running on empty. Finishing well starts now. If you'd like to learn more about Robin, you can find her at robinfuller.coach. Thanks for joining us today on Lifeline for Leaders. If today's episode was meaningful, feel free to share it with someone who might benefit. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss a conversation.
Remember, you don't have to walk this mission alone. We're honored to walk alongside you.
See you next time.